when they tell you that monsters don't exist. Remember the story of Vera Regel, a girl whose mind was forever frozen in childhood and whose heart craved love so much that she didn't notice how she ended up in a trap. Behind the door of an ordinary house in the state of Ohio, she was awaited by a woman nicknamed Sugar Baby, a mother of 9 children who collected infants and skillfully turned people into slaves. This is the sad story of Vera Regel. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more cases. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Vera Regel was incredibly vulnerable due to her intellectual disabilities. She was very easy to manipulate. The girl lived in one of the most disgusting families, where she was accompanied by physical and sexual abuse, verbal insults, and bullying. This family was led by a woman named Cheri Brooks, a kind of Charles Manson in a skirt. The Brooks family was also involved in cult activities led by Cheri. Cheri Brooks was born on November 3, 1962, in Findlay, Ohio. From a very early age, she was subjected to abuse by her own father, Chuck, who brutally treated both the heirs and their mother. Chuck called Cheri Sugar Baby. Most horrifyingly, she liked this nickname and used it for herself when she became an adult. Cheri's mother, Charlotte, knew about her daughter's suffering but never did anything about it. When Cheri turned 3, the state took her away from her parents and placed her in a foster home. Until the age of 16, the girl was moved from one set of foster parents to another. History is silent about what happened to Cheri during those years. It is known that she did not become happy in any family, did not feel sincere care and warmth, and did not find stability. At 16, Cheri left the foster family where she spent her last months and returned to her mother, who had simply stood aside when her father abused her daughter in childhood. An even more disturbing fact was that Chuck himself lived nearby. He had divorced his wife but continued to visit her periodically. Upon learning that his sugar baby had settled in her mother's house, the man began to visit more often, wanting to get close to his daughter again. But the feelings he had for her were by no means fatherly. Chuck said that Cheri was his favorite and that he would do anything she wanted. However, his words sounded false, with a hint, because he pursued his own perverted goals. The terrible thing was that Cheri liked such attention from her father. She was ready for anything to earn Chuck's favor, to give him pleasure, even if it involved sexual abuse. She was pleased that at least someone was interested in her. Shortly after Cheri left her foster parents, an important thing happened. For some strange reason, the girl decided that someone had stolen her child. She repeatedly told her mother that while she was in a foster home, she got pregnant and allegedly gave birth to a little girl, and then someone stole her. In the end, no one stole her child. It was all a lie. The truth was that another girl, who also lived in the foster home, gave birth to a daughter, and Cheri, a pathological liar, lived in a world of fantasies and made up this story in the hope of stealing the baby. Fortunately, she did not succeed. However, subsequently, as an adult, Cheri repeatedly had obsessive ideas about kidnapping minors. When Cheri turned 18, she entered into an incestuous relationship with her maternal cousin, Daniel Bixler Sr., who suffered from mental retardation. Apparently, the family did not consider this romance shameful and jokingly called Cheri and Daniel kissing cousins. Soon the girl became pregnant and gave birth to a son whom she named Scotty. Scotty became the first of Cheri Brooks' 9 children. It can be said with certainty that Cheri's life went wrong from birth. But with age, everything only got worse, because gradually she herself turned into a monster. Shortly after the birth of her son, she began to subject him to abuse. Cheri completely repeated the behavior of her biological father, Chuck. Eventually, authorities became aware of the young woman's inappropriate behavior toward her son. He was taken from the family and given to Cheri's mother, Charlotte, to be raised, who was unlikely to be a better guardian than her own daughter. The most outrageous thing in this story is that Cheri did not face any punishment for abusing Scotty. She wasn't even threatened with a fine or public condemnation. The craziest part is that Cheri continued to be allowed to see her son, although she clearly could not be trusted with a child. In March 1982, shortly after Scotty was placed in his grandmother's care, Cheri broke up with her cousin and entered a new relationship with a man named Michael Mullaney. They got married a few weeks after meeting and began living together. Soon, Cheri became pregnant again, and they had a son named Joshua. Although Child Protective Services knew perfectly well that the woman had abused her first son, she was allowed to keep the second without extra questions. Overall, the family lived in terrible conditions, in a dirty trailer where unsanitary conditions prevailed. No one ever cleaned there. Joshua crawled on the sticky floor among scraps, mold, and food packaging. He was rarely bathed, his clothes were almost never changed, and he was poorly fed. Although Cheri was entitled to free baby food, she was too lazy and didn't want to go get it. Instead, she fed the infant cow's milk, which could cause stomach problems. By the time Joshua was 3 months old, his health left much to be desired. He already had stomach problems, cried constantly, and didn't sleep at night. Pediatricians repeatedly told Cheri that she should not feed her son cow's milk, but she continued to do so. The problem was that cow's milk contains a lot of protein, which a newborn's liver cannot yet process. But Cheri didn't care at all, and Child Protective Services, apparently, didn't either. Joshua was constantly nauseous and had stomach pains. Because of this, he didn't sleep at night and cried incessantly. Joshua's father, Michael, once got so angry at his son for crying that he hit him in the face, cursed him, and threw him onto the sofa. Cheri just sat there at that moment and did nothing. Likely, the man repeatedly abused Joshua. However, that time when Michael behaved aggressively, another family member was in the trailer who turned out to be a decent person and immediately reported the abuse to Child Protective Services. In December 1983, little Joshua was immediately taken from the home and placed under protection. The father and mother were accused of inappropriate behavior and neglect of parental duties. During interrogation, Cheri admitted that Michael had hit her and Joshua several times because the child made Mike lose his temper. The woman stated that she never intervened in the parenting process. Cheri and Michael remained under the supervision of Child Protective Services, possibly in hopes that they could change their lives and regain custody. However, they did nothing, and Joshua remained under the care of Hancock Child Protective Services forever. Fortunately for the child, he was adopted and was able to grow up under a different name. Joshua was the second child taken from Cheri, but the woman did not stop there. She did not give up hope of producing offspring. In 1984, 22-year-old Cheri became pregnant by Michael again, and they had another son, Michael Jr. The same story repeated with the third son. Child Protective Services received a report of abuse and neglect of parental duties when Michael Jr. was only a few months old. The boy was taken from the dysfunctional family. This was already the third child in a row that Cheri had lost. Everyone around understood that she was simply incapable of caring for children, everyone except herself. After 3 children were taken from her, in early 1986, she became pregnant again and this time gave birth to a girl, her 4th child. The baby, named Maria, was Cheri's first daughter. The mother's behavior toward the infant was completely different. She adored her little princess. Maria was the light of her life. According to friends and relatives, Cheri was obsessed with her daughter. She finally cleaned her trailer. It became surprisingly clean and tidy. Cheri dressed Maria in clean clothes, carefully monitored her hygiene, fed her correctly, and cared for her daughter with special warmth. The woman did not allow anyone to hold her daughter. If anyone even approached Maria, Cheri gave a disapproving look. This was very different from how she behaved with her sons. But there were reasons for everything. Things were looking up, but with the birth of her daughter, the cycle of violence in Cheri's home did not stop. One day in the spring of 1987, Maria was rushed to the hospital. She was brought by her grandmother. The girl had vaginal bleeding, and it turned out that she had been subjected to repeated abuse by her own mother. Cheri wouldn't let anyone near her daughter because she was afraid the child would be taken away. She felt a kind of unhealthy attachment to the girl and wanted to keep her for her own perverted fantasies. That night, Maria was examined and returned to her parents' custody, while the doctor contacted the police and spoke about his suspicions. Cheri didn't yet understand what was going on until law enforcement officers came to her house. The woman hurriedly tried to hide her daughter and refused to tell the officers where she was. But it didn't take much time for the police to figure out where the mother had put the child. 1-year-old Maria was immediately taken from Cheri's custody. In desperation, Cheri tried to steal someone else's child. The baby's name was Vera Regel. She was only 6 months old and was the daughter of a neighbor, a woman named Vera. After Maria was taken from Cheri, she began to spend a lot of time with the baby living next door, trying to replace the girl's biological mother. It was eerie because Cheri acted as if Vera were her own child. Eventually, Vera got tired of this behavior and forbade the neighbor from seeing her daughter. But Cheri was not going to give up. She planned to kidnap the little neighbor because she wanted her for herself. Fortunately, Vera managed to protect the child from the obsessive care. Experiencing disappointment, Cheri could think of nothing better than to get pregnant for the 5th time. She again gave birth to a girl, whom she named Little Cheri. Despite all previous cases of ill treatment of offspring, the woman was again allowed to keep the newborn. The story repeated. The mother was obsessed with her daughter. At 6 months old, Little Cheri was taken by protective services. Thus, the 24-year-old woman had already lost 5 of her children. Subsequently, neither Joshua, nor Maria, nor Little Cheri ever saw their biological mother again. In the following years, many changes occurred in Cheri's life. She divorced her husband Michael and married Kevin Lee Brooks. They came to the house that soon became known as the House of Horrors. Little is known about what the negligent mother was doing all that time. But when Cheri turned 28, she became pregnant again and gave birth to a boy, whom she named after her husband, Kevin Lee Punky Brooks Jr. Unlike her other sons, whom she completely neglected, Punky became special to her. Cheri cared for him like a girl. She bathed him and dressed him in clean clothes. She did everything a mother is supposed to do. The 6th son became the first child they didn't take from Cheri's custody. This did not mean that the woman suddenly realized all her mistakes and turned into an ideal mother. Brooks simply learned to better cover her tracks. In the following years, Cheri gave birth to 3 more children, and they all stayed with her. She was still cruel and inattentive to her offspring, but successfully hid it from the authorities. So, in June 1992, Cheri's 7th son, Zachary, was born. A year later, in July 1993, the 8th son, Garth, was born. And finally, the last child of Cheri Brooks was Chuck, born in 1997. The woman raised the sons, but did not feel happy because she had always dreamed of a daughter. The sons caused her irritation and dissatisfaction. Cheri made plans to change the situation. She acted slowly but surely. Over the next 10 years, Punky, Zachary, Garth, and Chuck grew up, entering their teenage period. During this time, the Brooks family gained a bad reputation in the local community, and people began to avoid them. They were stuck with the reputation of bullies and manipulators who terrorized their neighbors, constantly creating problems for them. Cheri herself earned a bad name throughout the city. It was later revealed that Brooks became involved in the distribution of illicit substances. She practically headed her own small criminal group, teaching her 4 sons to go against the law. Cheri introduced herself to everyone as Sugar Baby, the eerie nickname her father once gave her. She was so domineering and so skillfully manipulated those around her that some compared her to Charles Manson. Cheri created a cult of personality within her own family, where everyone unquestioningly obeyed her will. The mother of many ruled with an iron fist, and everyone feared her and tried to please her. It's no wonder that her 4 sons became a real nightmare for the neighbors. The eldest son, Punky, was incredibly cruel. He beat people on the street for no reason, just to show his power. He was also involved in dealing illicit drugs and was known as the town bully. Punky told everyone he was a member of the Crips gang, although this was likely just an additional way to intimidate. The guy did everything so that people would fear him, and Punky was the only person his mother feared. The 3 other sons were no better, cruel manipulators involved in criminal activity. The Brooks family was becoming a source of trouble for those around them. Normal people didn't want to communicate with them and stayed away. Be that as it may, Cheri still could not rest because of the fact that she didn't have a daughter. And she came up with a diabolical plan. Brooks wanted her teenage sons to provide her with a girl themselves. At that time, the three eldest boys were between 13 and 16 years old, and Cheri began to pressure them all into unprotected intimacy. She found them girlfriends herself, because each of the girls had to get Cheri's approval. At the same time, all the candidates were vulnerable and insecure teenagers who were easy to manipulate. Punky got a girlfriend named Heather. The third eldest son, Garth, had a girlfriend named Gina. Cheri insisted that the guys bring their girlfriends to their house and engage in unprotected intimacy with them. The mother herself was outside the room and literally directed the whole process. Eventually, Punky's girlfriend Heather got pregnant, and Cheri was on cloud 9, hoping she would have a granddaughter. But unfortunately for her, Heather gave birth to a boy, which unusually angered Cheri. Life was hard for the young mother. According to friends and relatives, Punky was the boss of the house. Despite this, Cheri loved her son until he was taken away, but this time not by Child Protective Services. In July 2010, Punky and his girlfriend, Heather, were heading to a place to buy illicit substances. They were walking along the side of the road when a car driver, exceeding the speed limit, accidentally hit the guy. Punky was taken from the scene to the hospital, where he subsequently died. Cheri was informed of what happened about 20 minutes after Punky was taken by ambulance. By the time she rushed to her son, he was no longer alive. Despite the circumstances of the accident, the mother blamed Heather for everything. That night, Punky was walking closer to the roadway when he was hit by the car. Cheri believed the girlfriend had intentionally pushed her boyfriend under the wheels. Brooks convinced everyone that Heather had paid the driver to intentionally run over Punky. The grief-stricken mother didn't care about facts. She just wanted to take her anger out on someone, and that someone turned out to be the deceased son's girlfriend. Cheri wanted revenge and did not hesitate. During the memorial service at their home, she talked a relative into beating up Heather. As a result, the girl's nose was broken and her face was severely mutilated. Saying goodbye, Cheri shouted at her, "This is what you get for messing with my family and sending my son to the other world." Cheri cremated Punky's body, but instead of burying or scattering his ashes, she put the urn on a shelf in her living room. She added one of his t-shirts, some of his gang paraphernalia, and even left room for his favorite chocolate bars. It became a kind of home memorial. The woman only calmed down when Gina, the 15-year-old girlfriend of her other son Garth, got pregnant. An ultrasound showed she was going to have a girl. As soon as Cheri found out, she took charge of Gina, following her everywhere and completely controlling her life. She tormented the girl by claiming that this baby belonged only to her. Cheri was domineering and treated Gina poorly. One day, she realized what a mistake she had made moving into the Brooks house and decided she had had enough. She packed her things and got ready to leave. But before she could do so, she suffered a miscarriage. Cheri blamed Garth's girlfriend for everything because she had once again lost the opportunity to get a baby girl. And now Brooks was busy searching for a companion for the second eldest son. As a girlfriend for Zachary, Cheri chose a girl named Vera Regel. This was the same baby girl Brooks had once tried to steal from her neighbor. And now, all these years later, Cheri finally found a way to bring her into her home. During her short life, Vera went through many hardships. As a child, the girl was diagnosed with various intellectual disabilities, including ADHD. Her IQ was significantly below average. Vera's developmental age was much lower than her actual age. As a teenager, she behaved like an 8-year-old child. From a young age, Vera was repeatedly subjected to sexual and physical abuse. The source of many of her sufferings was her own father, who subjected her to abuse starting from the age of 11. Although the man was eventually sentenced to 20 years in prison, his crime had already caused irreparable damage to Vera's fragile psyche. The girl with mental retardation had almost no hope for a bright future, because the abuse was continued by her mother's new boyfriend. Despite all the difficulties, the girl tried to study as best she could. She had many friends and hobbies. Most of all, she loved country music and handmade jewelry. One day on the street, Vera ran into her former neighbor, Cheri Brooks. She told her a funny story about how she once intended to steal a little girl from her parents, whom she loved with all her heart. And that girl turned out to be Vera Regel. The former acquaintances laughed and parted on a friendly note. Cheri realized that Vera was the ideal victim because she was vulnerable and easy to manipulate. She decided that she had found the perfect girlfriend for her 13-year-old son Zachary and gradually pulled the girl into her perverted world. Shortly after finishing school, Vera Jo Regel, not without Cheri's help, became friends with Cheri Brooks. At first, the young people were just dating, but 2 years later, their relationship grew romantic. Vera became part of the Brooks family and moved into their house. Cheri began to prepare Vera for the fact that she must give Zachary a child. The woman completely subordinated the new victim and began to manipulate her. Brooks had diabetes, which caused her severe pain in her legs. Additionally, the woman suffered from excess weight and was confined to a wheelchair. Very soon, Vera was doing all the housework because Cheri herself could not fully handle the chores. Though she could give orders, the girl was happy to serve the person who cared for her and joyfully carried out all instructions. She gave Cheri foot massages, tidied the rooms, and even dealt illicit substances at Brooks' request. Eventually, Cheri learned that Vera received disability benefits and convinced the girl to give all the money to her as rent for living there. Vera again joyfully agreed, as due to her mental health problems, she simply did not understand she was being manipulated. She likely saw motherly care in Cheri's behavior, a person who took her in and was kind to her. About a year later, Vera was completely isolated from the outside world. Her mobile phone was taken away, and she was forbidden from visiting relatives. Cheri said that her mother wanted nothing to do with her, and the girl believed her. If Vera left the house and met one of her old acquaintances, she would secretly wave a hand in greeting and immediately turn away before Cheri noticed. This continued for several more years. Brooks was not in a hurry, playing the long game with Vera. She manipulated the girl and brainwashed her for years. Everything was aggravated by the fact that Regel's parents moved to another city, and Vera now depended entirely on Cheri. She had no one who could help her. Zachary turned 16. The guy, like Vera, had developmental problems and suffered from a personality disorder. Therefore, it was easy for Cheri to direct them both. Soon, Brooks got what she wanted. 22-year-old Vera got pregnant by 16-year-old Zachary. Cheri immediately informed the future parents that if they had a girl, she would keep her for herself, and Vera would not have the right to see her own child. Brooks backed up her intentions with actions. She accompanied the pregnant woman to all doctor appointments, independently chose baby clothes, furniture, and everything else. Cheri even took responsibility for choosing the name for the child, Escalating. Behind this name was a specific meaning, a combination of the name of Vera's biological father, whose name was Willard, and the middle name of Cheri's biological father, Dean. Both men had subjected their daughters to sexual abuse, and Brooks wanted to immortalize their names by naming her own granddaughter that way. As the birth approached, Cheri became increasingly domineering and unstable. Vera was no more than an incubator for the child to her. In September, Cheri told Zachary that he needed to give up parental rights to the girl and transfer them to her. He agreed, and naturally, they did not process any official papers. By the end of October, another idea occurred to Brooks. Her birthday was November 3rd, and Escalating was supposed to be born in December. The woman decided to give herself a gift and speed up the baby's arrival into the world. Castor oil had been used as a homeopathic remedy for centuries. In particular, it was used to induce labor. Only a couple of tablespoons were required. An overdose could cause a range of side effects: stomach pain, bleeding, and the like. Cheri bought 3 bottles, and on November 3rd, mixing the oil with orange juice, forced Vera to drink this cocktail. Vera became very ill. She started having contractions, just as Brooks hoped. However, everything turned out not quite as Cheri wanted. The child was born 6 weeks early, on November 4th, and not the 3rd, as the woman dreamed. Baby Escalating was born premature with a very low weight. She had difficulty breathing and developed heart problems. The girl had to spend several weeks in intensive care, and all this happened only because Cheri wanted the child's birthday to coincide with her own. Fortunately or not, Escalating pulled through. Vera took her daughter home. She was proud of her girl and happy in the role of a young mom. However, Cheri considered the baby hers, snatched the child from the mother's hands, and took her to her room. Zachary, the girl's father, was nearby. but he didn't care about his daughter, as he himself was essentially still a teenager. For the first few months, Vera tried to take care of her daughter herself, but she was not allowed to interact with Weladian, let alone hold her. This irritated Cheri, and she began to insult and humiliate Vera in every way, inciting her sons to beat her up. If not for the disability benefit, Weladian's mother would have been kicked out to the four winds long ago, but Cheri did not want to lose the free money. Continuing to live in that house was Vera's biggest mistake. Over 2 years, the police were called to the Brookses 10 times due to allegations of domestic violence. Vera was questioned several times by officers, but out of fear of Cheri and her sons, the girl refused to say anything bad about them. Vera insisted every time that she liked living with them and wanted to stay. Despite limited intellectual abilities and clear signs of abuse, authorities considered Vera capable of making her own decisions. In fact, the conditions in which the Brookses lived were horrifying. They had no plumbing, they used a bucket for a toilet. As pets, they kept a dog and a pig in the house, which defecated right indoors. No one cleaned the rooms, so cockroaches were scurrying everywhere. Such an environment was not at all suitable for newborn Weladian. But because Cheri was considered Vera's guardian and Zachary had legal rights to his daughter, protective services did not take the baby. After Weladian's birth, Zachary broke up with Vera for good. He no longer wanted to be her boyfriend. Vera was upset, as she was very sensitive and suffered from any pain, and Cheri found it amusing. She liked to watch others suffer. Now Brooks completely isolated Vera from the outside world, convincing her that she was needed by no one but them, that even her own mother had abandoned her daughter, moved to another city, and forgotten about her. The incredibly vulnerable girl believed everything she was told. She lacked the strength and the mind to stand up for herself. Intellectually, she was still a child. Additionally, Cheri forbade Vera to leave the house without permission, turning her into a prisoner. The abuse was constantly intensifying. Food restrictions became the next punishment. While the rest of the family sat at the table, Vera had to eat on the floor like an animal. She was given dinner leftovers and moldy food from the trash bin. She was kept in disgusting conditions, locked in a cold room with a broken window. She slept on a dirty, smelly mattress, soaked in animal urine and feces. Beatings continued daily. Cheri forced her sons to punish Vera physically if she approached Weladian, or she herself took a stick and thrashed the girl. Vera did not resist. She only curled into a ball and repeated, "Sorry, sorry, sorry." She was 24 years old, but developmentally she was around 8 years old, and believed she herself deserved such treatment. Authorities knew about what was happening. Protective services visited several times to check on Weladian's condition. They saw the environment of the house in which the young mother lived with the child, but for some reason took no action. One day in early 2011, exhausted Vera, who hadn't eaten anything for 3 days, was at home alone. At least, that's what she thought. The girl went into the living room, where the urn with Punky's ashes stood, and noticed a chocolate bar lying next to it. She grabbed the candy and immediately ate it, not quite understanding what she was doing. Vera hoped no one had noticed her, but that was a mistake. It turned out that Gina, the girlfriend of Garth, one of Cheri's sons, was in the house. After the miscarriage incident, Gina had lost the favor of her boyfriend's mother and was still desperately trying to make amends. Hoping to regain Cheri's trust, Gina told her that Vera had eaten the candy bar lying on Punky's shrine. After such insolence, Cheri lost her temper. She saw in Vera's behavior an attempt to devalue her power in the house. As punishment for the transgression, Brooks ordered her sons Zachary and Chuck to beat the brazen girl half to death. In the end, as a memory of the eaten candy bar, Vera was left with a broken nose, bruises under her eyes, and abrasions all over her body. But this was not the only punishment, because Cheri planned something worse. Although the Brooks family home could not be called huge, a crowd of people lived there. First and foremost, it was Cheri and her husband Kevin Lee Brooks, who did not participate in the abuse, but simply stood aside and watched what was happening. Then Vera and her 1-year-old daughter, Weladian, and Cheri's 3 youngest sons, Zachary, Chuck, and Garth, with his girlfriend Gina. Let's not forget that the negligent mother had other children. They grew up, and 2 of them returned to Cheri. It was the very first son, Scotty, whom Brooks gave birth to from her cousin, and her third son, Michael Jr. Michael's girlfriend Shannon also spent a lot of time in this house. Also living in the house was 21-year-old Danny Bixler, the second son of the cousin with whom Cheri had a relationship, and his girlfriend, 17-year-old Nicole Peters. Danny and Nicole first met when both were in a juvenile detention center. Nicole was obsessed with Danny, following him everywhere like a little lost puppy. For him, she was ready for anything. In Cheri Brooks' house, Danny was hiding from the police. He had violated the terms of his probation, and now he faced arrest. Bixler was a hardened criminal, and Nicole was a sadist who joyfully joined in the bullying of Vera, always with a smile on her face. Danny found a hanging metal padlock, attached it to the end of a belt, and began to lash Vera with this construction again and again. He hit her on the head so that the girl's face was covered in blood. At first, Nicole just watched, and then she herself began to join the beating, landing punches to Vera's face. Danny's girlfriend accused Vera of wanting to seduce her boyfriend, which naturally was not true. Beating an innocent victim caused sexual arousal in the couple, and they often paused to be alone. This happened every single day. Other members of the Brooks family said that Vera could no longer be considered human. Due to constant fear, she was withdrawn, silent, and could barely get up from the floor due to her injuries. When little Welladine grew up, Cheri began to lose interest in her and wanted another child. She started to pressure Zachary and Garth to force another girl to get pregnant, and categorically did not want Vera to be the mother. She didn't want Vera present in their lives at all anymore. Danny Bixler and Cheri's late son Punky both claimed to be in the Crips gang. The guys were close and very attached to each other. Cheri had blamed his girlfriend Heather for Punky's tragic death, but now a crazy idea came into Brooks' head: to frame the Vera Jo Regel she was tired of as the guilty one. The woman knew that Danny dreamed of avenging Punky's death, so she told the guy that it was Vera who was with him that evening, and that it was she who pushed the boyfriend under the car. Of course, this was another lie, as Cheri often made up tall tales. But when Danny heard this, he flew into a rage. He needed to vent his resentment for his gang comrade Punky on someone, and Vera was perfect for the role of the object of revenge. On March 24th, 2011, the Brooks family decided to punish Vera for Punky's death. Chuck, Zachary, and Garth knew this wasn't true, that the girl had nothing to do with the brothers' passing, but they needed a pretext to justify their cruel actions. Cheri ordered Vera to be stripped first and then beaten by everyone at once. Brooks' three youngest sons, as well as Danny and Nicole, participated in the attack. The other family members just sat and watched, acting as spectators. At some point, Danny pulled out a knife and stabbed Vera in the leg. Cheri found this funny. Laughing, she approached the girl lying on the floor and stuck a finger into the puncture wound. The situation escalated even more when Cheri forced her 14-year-old son, Chuck, to bring dog feces from outside. Vera was forced to eat the excrement, after which she vomited. But then Cheri forced her to eat it again. To finally humiliate the victim, she was subjected to abuse with a plunger and a toothbrush. It is quite obvious that no one in this family considered Vera a human being. Lately, Cheri had often joked about needing to get rid of Vera. She had a clear plan on how to avoid punishment. Brooks considered herself invulnerable because she had gotten away with everything before. Cheri was inspired by an incident that happened a couple of years ago when her nephew died under the wheels of a train. It was an accident, and now the woman wanted everything with Vera to look exactly the same. Brooks jokingly said that they should drug Regel with sleeping pills and force her to lie on the railroad tracks not far from the house. The train would not have time to brake and would crush the body, tearing it to pieces and destroying the evidence. At the same time, Cheri did not want to act herself, but preferred that someone else send Vera to the other world. Zachary, Vera's ex-boyfriend and father of Welladine, volunteered, but Cheri did not want any of her sons involved in the crime. Instead, she talked Danny Bixler into taking revenge on Vera for Punky's end, and the guy, along with his girlfriend Nicole, agreed to finish off the innocent girl. The events of the evening of March 26, 2011, remained not fully clarified. Everyone who was somehow involved in what was happening had their own version, but the result was the same. Danny and Nicole forced Vera to put on shoes and go for a walk with them. Barely alive after the beatings, the girl did not want to go, resisted, and screamed. But Danny threatened to smash her head against the porch if she didn't obey, so she simply had no choice. Leaving the house, Vera said to Cheri as she was closing the door, "Good night, sugar baby." These were her last words, after which she left accompanied by Danny Bixler and his girlfriend, Nicole Peters. Even in the last moments of her life, Vera treated the woman who had taken her in well, calling her by the name the mistress of the house so adored. The couple led the girl to the railroad tracks near their house, where they stabbed her several times until the blade became so dull it could no longer penetrate clothing. Danny and Nicole forced Vera to strip naked and continued to stab her in various parts of the body. Danny stabbed her in the legs so Vera couldn't run, and then grabbed her from behind, put a knife to her neck, and slit her throat from ear to ear. When the victim finally stopped resisting, they laid her across the railroad tracks so that her head would end up directly under the wheels of a moving train, and left, leaving her to die alone. The murder weapon, the knife, they threw into a nearby lake, and they themselves went to a friend's house to celebrate the successfully committed crime. Incredibly, Vera was still alive. She was barely clinging to life. But still, obeying instincts, she crawled off the rails and tucked her legs in. When the horn of an approaching train sounded, she was lying on the tracks naked in the fetal position. Unfortunately, due to her injuries, Vera Jo Regel no longer heard the clatter of the wheels. She passed away. Maybe in the last moments of her life, Vera thought about her daughter, whom she left in the hands of monsters. When the train approached, it could not stop in time. It seemed to the engineer that he saw a deer carcass on the tracks. The man was shocked to find a human body instead of an animal. The distance between Vera's body and the underside of the train was only a few centimeters. And although the train did not cause her any damage, by that time, she was already dead. It was the victim's last actions that helped solve the crime. It immediately became clear to detectives called to the scene that the victim received her wounds somewhere other than under the wheels of the train. When Vera crawled off the rails, she ruined Cheri's perfect plan. One of the police officers immediately recognized Vera, whom he had seen more than once at the Brooks' house. When detectives came to their home and reported that Vera Jo Regel had passed away, Cheri tried to portray despair. She immediately made up a story that the girl had supposedly met some strange black guy and ran away from home. According to the woman's assurances, he was the one involved in her ward's death. Fortunately, it did not take long for investigators to find out the truth. After the massacre, Danny Bixler, although he justified his attack on Vera, was still shocked by what had happened. He got very drunk and confessed everything to his sister, and Tanya, without thinking, called the police and told them about her brother's transgression. Nicole and Danny were immediately arrested. Danny Bixler almost immediately admitted guilt and also reported Nicole's role, although the girl herself at first declared her non-involvement in Vera's death. Then, Nicole Peters still confessed to the crime and told the police that the inspirer and instigator of everything was Cheri Brooks. In the end, the couple reached a plea deal with the investigation. Danny was sentenced to 40 years in prison for the slaughter of Vera Jo Regel, and Nicole to 23 years for complicity. The court took into account that at the time of the crime, Peters was a minor. She was only 17 years old. Cheri Brooks, Vera's ex-boyfriend and father of baby Welladine, was accused of obstruction of justice and sentenced to only 4 years in prison. Michael, Cheri's third son, was also accused of obstruction of justice and sentenced to 30 days in jail with 5 years of probation. His pregnant girlfriend Shannon took a plea deal and got off with a suspended sentence. Another of Cheri's sons, Garth, was accused of obstruction of justice and fined. The youngest, Chuck, at the time of sentencing was already serving time in a juvenile correctional facility for truancy. The judge sentenced him to a rehabilitation program. The guy was released shortly before his 18th birthday. The police checked all family members who could have been involved in the abuse of Vera, but no charges were ever brought against anyone. Cheri Brooks, the head of the family and, essentially, the organizer of the crime, once again managed to escape responsibility. Vera Jo Regel was a victim not only of specific people, but also of a system that knew about what was happening in the Brooks house, but could not protect a vulnerable girl. Based on this horrific story, a documentary film was made called Goodnight, Sugar Baby. In it, Cheri and other members of the Brooks family discuss Vera's death on camera. In one of the clips, Cheri was going to say something compromising, and one of her sons clamped his hand over his mother's mouth so she wouldn't blurt it out. After Vera Jo Regel's passing, many members of the Brooks family spent time in prison for various crimes. In 2015, Cheri was sentenced to 40 months in prison for illicit substance trafficking. Cheri Brooks met another woman and in 2015 became the father of another child. He was arrested in 2020 and sent to prison on charges of receiving stolen property and robbery. The man was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He was due to be released from prison in November 2024. The Brooks family, with the exception of Danny Bixler and Nicole Peters, remains in the same house in Findlay, Ohio, where this terrible story took place. Rumor has it that the head of the family, Cheri Brooks, passed away in 2021, but this information is not confirmed. The only positive moment is that little Weladine was taken from the Brooks home and given up for adoption. Since then, the girl has lived in a loving family. The day after the massacre, police searched the riverbank and found Vera Jo Regel's torn clothes. In the pocket of her favorite purple hoodie, a note was found with the words, "I love you, Weladine. You are our sweet baby. I am glad I became your mom and glad I gave birth to you on November 4th at 4:16 a.m., weighing 2 kilograms, 700 grams, and 48 centimeters tall. Mommy loves you." After the case was solved, detectives took the note from the evidence locker and gave it to Weladine's adoptive family. They hope that when the girl grows up and the right time comes, the parents will give her the message from the past. Whatever happens in little Weladine's life, one thing is clear: her biological mother loved her with all her heart. If you are finished watching, you're a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and give it a like. See you in the next video.